Hi, welcome to my weekly live stream. Nice to have you here. Today I want to talk about props. The past few live streams I've been talking about different books and neuroscience theories and research and all this stuff. And I thought, I'm going to do something more practical. So what came through this week in in my Facebook group was this question of what do you do with people who are really resistant to using props, and it's just such a common problem in the yoga world. And I thought, okay, I'll talk about that this week because I think props are fantastic and they've helped me so much over the years, and I think it's can be challenging to get people to use props, particularly in class. So I wrote a blog today. It's up about a student I had many years ago who just was very stiff and didn't want to use props, and he taught me essentially how to teach with props, which is that I stopped thinking about a pose, and like the right way to do the pose. And I started thinking in terms of like, what am I functionally trying to help people do? Whether it's like lateral, am I trying to help them lateral bend? Am I trying to help them do better, deeper forward bends, better back bends? What am I trying to do? And when I think about what I'm trying to do, then it's not about the pose. It's about how I can help people functionally, improve their functionality. So, the perfect example is triangle pose. You're supposed to do triangle pose and reach and get your right hand on the floor. And when that's just not necessarily that accessible to a lot of people. And if you think about triangle pose rather as a lateral bend, then I'm trying to create more mobility in the side body, then it doesn't matter where your hand goes. And you can use your leg as a prop, or you can use blocks as props to access that. So we all know, and I want to say one more thing, which is I've been teaching for a long time. And back in the day, like when I first started teaching in 1995, the only people who were really using props were, except for sticky mats, of course, were the Iyengar people, And Iyengar, obviously he's the one who kind of created props. I don't know if you know the story, but he was studying with, he was one of Krishnamacharya's students, and he was also studying with Krishnamacharya. And Krishnamacharya had a request come from somewhere in the north for a group of ladies wanted a yoga teacher to come and teach them. And so he sent Iyengar. And Iyengar was staying in this place that it was kind of a construction site. So there were like bricks around, and there was a steamroller, and there was just like stuff around. And apparently the story is that he went out and started experimenting with all these different props. And he's the one who really started to create props and bring them into the practice. So anyway, that's kind of a little history of where props come from. But, really anything can be a prop. And nowadays I see much more acceptance of props than I used to. Like people are not so as likely to say like, well, if you use a prop, there's something, that means you're not a good yogi or you're not trying hard enough. Rather, having props available and using props is seen just as a way to not hurt yourself and to make the pose more effective. The pose is more effective. Okay, so everybody knows about things like straps and bolsters and blankets. I think those are great props, but I'm sitting on one of my favorite props right now that I use a lot, my exercise ball. So during the day, because I sit at the office way too much, and during the day I can do things like back bends on my ball to take a break. And these things, like you can get them on Amazon for very, very affordable. They're not expensive. So I love props. And then you also have the added benefit of bouncing and creating some movement in the lymphatic system. So it's really good for your fascia, for hydrating your tissues. And it's just kind of gives you a little break from the monotony of sitting in front of your computer if you do too much of that like I do. Here's another one of my favorite props lately. This is a 3-minute egg. There we go. 3-minute egg. I'm trying to get it up there. Yeah, these are so fun. Oh my gosh. You can do all sorts of things with them. You can put them under the back of your head and lie on your back. You can put them between your shoulder blades. I like to also put them under my sacrum when I'm lying on my back, and then taking your feet up, and then you're having a little bit of the rock and roll. So these are super fun. And then you can make them, you can use them stable this way too. So I love 3-minute eggs. Here's another one of my favorite props I brought in. Sandbags. Legs up the wall with sandbags on your feet is delicious. It kind of creates a feeling of like there's a little bit of compression into the hip joints, which is really nice and very satisfying to the nervous system. I also love these to place this on my lower belly when I'm in a legs up pose. Some people use them like this, and the pressure of the sandbag is very soothing to the nervous system. It's like attachment therapists use this, people who are working with attachment issues, like just putting a sandbag on your lap, and how that compression is very soothing to the nervous system. So those are some of my favorite props. Oh, here's another one of my props that I like. Spiky balls. Spiky balls are great. These you can put under your back and kind of roll around. I mean, this isn't really a prop, but it's more of a self-massage tool. I wouldn't do this I wouldn't like put my hand on this for support in triangle pose, but it's great under your feet, rolling it under your feet, rolling it. I like to just lie on my back and roll it around under my back. The spiky balls are wonderful. So anyway, those are just some of the unusual things that I use or less usual things that I use in my practice. Feel free to leave a comment about some of your favorite props that you like to use in practice. The one more thing I want to say before I go is I just want to talk a little bit about how I helped my students to accept and to value using props. And the way that I started doing this was a long time ago, because I had this student who was really difficult, and he needed props so badly. He was so stiff. He needed props for everything, but he refused to use them. And so what I started doing is I realized, well, if I need one person to use props, then I have to teach it that way. So what I started doing was saying, for example, we're going to do a seated forward bend, but I want everyone to get a bolster, and we're all going to sit on the bolster. And so instead of making it optional, I made it mandatory. And then during the kind of mandatory, and then during the pose, I might say something like, well, if you choose to do this pose without the bolster, you're welcome to. But my hope was that many of the people in the room would be using the bolster and then feeling like, oh yeah, this feels really good with the prop. Maybe I should always do it this way. And by teaching that way, sometimes I call it the lowest common denominator teaching. And by teaching that way, I'm helping people understand the functional purpose of doing a pose, which is what matters to me. Like, what's it going to do for them? And then I help them to be able to feel safe and to feel shame-free about using the prop in their practice. So it works really well. It works really well in yoga class to have everybody use the prop, and then if they choose to take it away, then they can. But it's not the goal. The goal is not to take away the prop. The goal is to use the prop. So, and normalizing it like that can be really helpful for people. Okay, so please leave any comments about your favorite props, what you like to use, and any teaching tips about how to help people use props. And thanks for being here. I'll see you next week. Namaste.